Will Smith stood in the car dealership when the manager, shouting aggressively, slapped him in the face. What happened next left everyone shocked. Subscribe and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Will Smith stared out at the Los Angeles skyline from his home's expansive glass window. The city sparkled in the warm California evening, a mosaic of lights and sounds that never truly slept. Despite the success and adoration he had amassed over decades, Will felt a deep restlessness within. The recent accolades, the red carpets, and even the intimate moments of celebration with family all felt hollow, like applause echoing in an empty room. He leaned against the glass, allowing his thoughts to wander back to his childhood in Philadelphia. The narrow streets of his old neighborhood painted a sharp contrast to the sprawling luxury surrounding him now. Back then, life was simple yet challenging, filled with dreams shared with his friends about escaping to a better future. They would sit on stoops, sketching their ambitions on the air with laughter and longing. Fast cars, big houses, and a life free of struggle were recurring themes in those teenage visions. The memory of his first car, a beat-up Ford Taurus his father had painstakingly saved for, brought a faint smile to his face. It wasn't luxurious, but it represented freedom, the ability to traverse boundaries, both physical and symbolic. The thought tugged at something deep within him, an idea that had been simmering ever since his recent visit to an underfunded community center. The children there, bright-eyed and full of potential, reminded him of himself and his friends. He saw in them the same hunger to escape their circumstances, to reach for dreams that seemed impossibly out of reach. Will turned away from the window and paced the room. His mind was a whirlwind of images and ideas, children laughing, cars zooming through the streets, the joy of breaking free from limitations, even if only for a day. A bold thought began to take shape, and he couldn't shake it. What if he could create an experience for those kids, one that combined the thrill of their dreams with a real sense of belonging and joy? That night, Will sat down with a notebook and began sketching out his vision. A one-day event where underprivileged children could ride in luxury cars, feel the wind in their faces, and experience the excitement of a life they often saw only in movies or on television. It would be more than just fun. It would be a celebration of possibility, a way to show them that dreams, no matter how distant, could be touched. The next morning, he called a meeting with his team. Gathered around the sleek conference table in his home office, his closest collaborators listened as Will passionately detailed his idea. He spoke of his childhood, the Ford Taurus, and the kids who inspired him. "I want this to be real," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I want them to feel what it's like to ride in these cars, to dream bigger, to know that someone cares." The room buzzed with cautious excitement, but concerns quickly emerged. His manager, Lisa, leaned forward, her brows knitted. "Will, it's a beautiful idea, but we need to be careful. People might see this as a publicity stunt, especially with your name attached. You've worked hard to stay authentic, and this could backfire if not handled right." Will understood her concerns, but he was resolute. "This isn't about me. It's about them. If I wanted publicity, there are easier ways to get it. This has to come from the heart." The team brainstormed ways to make the event feel genuine and impactful. They discussed partnerships with local organizations, involving community leaders, and even inviting other celebrities to lend their support. Will knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to make it happen. Later that day, Will decided to visit a local luxury car dealership to explore potential collaborations. Driving through the streets of Los Angeles, he couldn't help but notice the stark contrasts around him. In one block, he passed towering skyscrapers and high-end boutiques. In the next, he saw dilapidated buildings and people struggling to get by. It reminded him of the duality he often felt as a public figure. One foot in the world of fame and excess, the other still rooted in the humble beginnings that shaped him. The image of his Ford Taurus flashed in his mind again. It had been old and unreliable, but it was his gateway to freedom. The dealership came into view, its sleek, modern facade gleaming under the afternoon sun. Will parked his car and took a deep breath. This was the first step in making his vision a reality. The story unfolds further as Will steps into the dealership, where the encounter with Sarah Hudson, the sales manager, begins to shape the next chapter of his journey. The dealership was an architectural marvel of sleek glass walls and polished metal, a temple of opulence dedicated to the gods of speed and luxury. The shimmering Los Angeles sun reflected off the rows of pristine vehicles displayed behind spotless windows, each one a testament to engineering perfection and human ambition. Will took a moment to steady himself, brushing off any lingering doubts about this endeavor. His footsteps echoed as he crossed the gleaming marble floor, the quiet hum of soft jazz playing overhead contrasting with the occasional rev of an engine in the service bay. Inside, the dealership felt even more opulent. Rows of cars gleamed under recessed lighting, each vehicle a masterpiece of design. The air was cool, perfumed with the faint scent of leather upholstery and industrial polish. Every surface seemed to radiate sophistication, from the mahogany reception desk to the carefully curated artwork adorning the walls. Sarah Hudson, the sales manager, stood near the center of the showroom, reviewing a clipboard. She was a tall, striking woman in her late 30s, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit that matched the sleekness of her surroundings. Her demeanor was professional, almost severe, with an air of confidence that bordered on aloofness. She glanced up as Will entered, her expression flickering briefly with recognition before settling into a practiced neutrality. Will approached her with his signature easygoing smile, extending a hand. "Hi, I'm Will. I wanted to talk about something a little unconventional." Sarah hesitated, her eyes briefly scanning him from head to toe. Her handshake was firm but perfunctory, her smile more of a polite reflex than a genuine gesture. "Welcome. How can I help you today?" Will explained his idea, carefully outlining his vision for the event. He spoke with enthusiasm, describing the joy he hoped to bring to underprivileged children and the potential for the dealership to play a central role in making it happen. But as he talked, he noticed Sarah's expression grow increasingly distant, her posture stiffening. Her response was measured, almost dismissive. "That's an interesting idea, Mr. Smith, but we cater to a very specific clientele here. Our vehicles aren't exactly accessible to the general public." Will raised an eyebrow, sensing the underlying tone in her words. "I'm not asking for donations or charity. I'm proposing a partnership, something that could benefit both the community and your dealership's image." Sarah's smile tightened. "I understand, but events like this require careful consideration. Luxury brands depend on exclusivity. Associating with certain demographics can sometimes dilute that image." The words hung in the air like a slap, subtle yet unmistakable. Will felt a surge of irritation but kept his composure. He had encountered this kind of coded prejudice before, wrapped in polite language and corporate justifications. He decided to press on, unwilling to let the conversation end on such a note. "I see what you mean," he said evenly, "but I think you're underestimating the impact this could have. Imagine the stories people will tell about a dealership that brought joy to kids who've never even dreamed of sitting in a car like this. That kind of goodwill lasts longer than any advertising campaign. Sarah tilted her head, her gaze scrutinizing. We'd have to ensure the event aligns with our brand's values. These vehicles require a certain level of appreciation, a sense of— She paused, searching for the word, refinement. I'm not sure everyone would understand that. The passive-aggressive implication was clear, and it took every ounce of Will's patience not to react. Instead, he decided to shift the focus. Why don't we take a look at a few cars? Maybe that'll help us figure out how to make this work. Reluctantly, Sarah gestured for him to follow her. As they walked through the showroom, she pointed out various models, her tone becoming increasingly condescending. She spoke at length about the craftsmanship and engineering, often emphasizing how these vehicles were designed for discerning buyers. Will nodded politely, absorbing both the information and the undercurrent of her attitude. At one point, she stopped in front of a sleek black convertible. "This is one of our most exclusive models," she said, her voice tinged with pride. "Not everyone can appreciate what it takes to own a car like this. The upkeep alone is more than some people make in a year." Will glanced at the car, his mind flashing back to his first Ford Taurus. The gap between his past and the present felt like a chasm, but it also fueled his determination. He placed a hand on the car's hood as if grounding himself. "Beautiful," he said, his voice steady, "but I'm not here for myself. I'm here for the kids who might see this and think, one day, that could be mine." Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line, her discomfort evident. Before she could respond, another customer entered the showroom, a well-dressed older man with an air of affluence. He paused near them, his eyes flicking between Sarah and Will. For a moment, an awkward silence hung in the air. Sarah turned to the man with a warm, practiced smile. "Good afternoon, sir. Can I assist you with anything?" The man shook his head. "Just browsing. Don't mind me." He lingered nearby, however, clearly intrigued by the interaction. Will couldn't help but notice the shift in Sarah's demeanor. Her tone became more accommodating, her body language more open. The contrast was stark, and it only deepened Will's resolve. As they moved to another section of the showroom, Sarah's comments grew sharper, her frustration thinly veiled. She made it clear that a test drive was out of the question unless he demonstrated serious intent to purchase. The implication stung, but Will refused to rise to the bait. The interaction reached a boiling point when Will suggested a specific car for the event, a vibrant red sports car that seemed perfect for capturing the children's imaginations. Sarah crossed her arms, her tone turning icy. "Mr. Smith, we have a reputation to uphold. These cars aren't for everyone. Perhaps you should consider a different venue for your idea." The words struck a nerve, a flood of memories rushing back. He thought of the store clerk who had refused to serve him as a teenager, the auditions where he was typecast or dismissed, the countless microaggressions he had endured over the years. His jaw tightened, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Thanks for your time," he said finally, his voice steady but tinged with disappointment. "I'll think about it." As he turned to leave, he caught a glimpse of the older man watching him, a look of discomfort etched on his face. Will wondered if the man understood what had just transpired, if he saw the layers beneath the surface. But no words were exchanged, and Will walked out into the bright afternoon sun, the weight of the encounter heavy on his shoulders. The door of the dealership swung shut behind Will, the sunlight outside briefly blinding him as he stepped into the bright Los Angeles afternoon. The cool, polished air of the showroom had felt suffocating, and now, out on the street, he took a deep breath to steady himself. His encounter with Sarah Hudson replayed in his mind like a scratch on a record, the condescension in her voice, the subtle but cutting remarks about certain demographics and appreciating refinement. He clenched his fists, then released them, forcing himself to let the tension drain from his body. As much as he wanted to shake it off, the sting of her words lingered. Memories from his youth rose unbidden, moments when his worth had been questioned or diminished because of who he was, where he came from, or the color of his skin. The flashbacks were vivid, being followed by a store clerk at 16, denied service at a diner at 17, and countless instances since where prejudice had worn a mask of politeness. Will stood by his car for a moment, letting the frustration ebb. He wasn't here to fight old battles. He was here to create something meaningful. He reminded himself of the kids, their bright eyes and infectious laughter. This was about them, not him. But even as he repeated that mantra, he couldn't entirely shake the bitterness. He was about to leave when a thought struck him. Leaving now would feel like surrender. Maybe there was a way to salvage this interaction, to turn it into something constructive. He decided to go back inside, determined to resolve things with Sarah and make her see the value of his vision. As he stepped back into the showroom, the atmosphere felt even colder than before. Sarah was speaking with the older gentleman who had entered earlier, her posture relaxed and her tone warm. The contrast was stark and undeniable. When she noticed Will, her smile faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered. "Mr. Smith, was there something else you needed?" Her words were polite, but her tone carried an edge, as if his return was an inconvenience. "I wanted to talk more about the partnership," Will said, keeping his voice calm. "I think there's a way we can make this work, something that benefits everyone involved." Sarah's expression hardened. "I thought we were clear. This dealership has a reputation to maintain. Our vehicles aren't meant to be props for—" She hesitated, then added, "events like yours." The words hit harder than Will had expected. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain composed. "It's not just an event. It's about creating opportunities, showing kids that their dreams are valid, no matter where they come from." Sarah crossed her arms, her stance defensive. "And what message does it send if we start giving away access to something that's supposed to be exclusive? These cars are a symbol of achievement, not charity." Will felt his patience wearing thin. "So, you're saying those kids don't deserve to dream? That they're not worthy of even experiencing something like this?" Her eyes narrowed, and her voice dropped to a sharp whisper. "I'm saying this isn't the right fit, Mr. Smith, and frankly, I think you're wasting both of our time." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension was palpable, drawing the attention of the other customers in the showroom. Finally, Will said, "If that's how you feel, then I guess we're done here." He turned to leave, but before he could take a step, Sarah's voice stopped him. "This isn't a place for people like you." The words were quiet, almost under her breath, but they cut through the air like a knife. Will froze, his back to her, the weight of her statement sinking in. The showroom seemed to fall silent, the soft jazz and distant hum of engines fading into the background. He turned slowly, his expression a mix of disbelief and anger. "Excuse me?" Sarah seemed to realize she had crossed a line, but instead of backtracking, she doubled down. Her voice rose, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. "You heard me. This isn't your world, Mr. Smith. Maybe you should stick to what you know." The room fell into a stunned silence. The older gentleman from earlier looked visibly uncomfortable, his gaze darting between Will and Sarah. A younger customer near the entrance pulled out his phone, discreetly recording the scene. Will took a step closer, his voice low but steady. "I came here with respect, with an idea that could have been good for everyone. But you've made it clear what you think of me, and what you think of the kids I'm trying to help. That says a lot more about you than it does about me." Sarah's face flushed, her composure slipping. "I think you should leave," she said, her voice shaking slightly. Will nodded, his jaw tight. "Gladly." As he turned to walk away, she took a step forward, her voice rising again. "People like you always think you're entitled to everything." And then it happened. In a moment of unrestrained emotion, Sarah reached out and slapped him across the face. The sound echoed through the showroom, freezing everyone in place. The young man with the phone gasped audibly, his recording now capturing the shocked expressions of everyone in the room. Will stood still, his face turned slightly from the impact. Slowly, he straightened, his gaze meeting hers. His expression wasn't one of anger, but of deep disappointment. Without a word, he turned and walked out, leaving behind a stunned silence and a room full of witnesses. The cool air outside the dealership felt like a shock against Will's flushed face. He stood still for a moment, letting the chaos of emotions inside him settle. The sting of Sarah's slap was nothing compared to the deeper wound of her words, the blatant insult, the dismissal of his humanity. He took a deep breath and looked up at the Los Angeles sky, bright and indifferent. It was a city that thrived on appearances, but this time appearances couldn't shield the truth. As he walked to his car, Will noticed a young man hurrying out of the dealership behind him, phone still in hand. The guy looked barely out of college, his eyes wide with excitement. "Mr. Smith," he called out. I caught everything on video. That was insane. Are you okay?" Will stopped and turned, his expression carefully neutral. "What are you talking about?" "The whole thing. She slapped you, man. And everything she said before that." The guy hesitated, glancing down at his phone. "It's all here. I didn't mean to record it at first, but then I just couldn't stop." Will frowned, a knot forming in his stomach. He could already see where this was going. In a world where moments were measured in likes and retweets, this video wouldn't stay private for long. "Listen," Will said, his tone firm but not unkind. "I appreciate your concern, but this isn't something I want to blow up into a bigger issue." The young man looked conflicted, clutching his phone. "I get it, but people need to see this. Stuff like this happens all the time, and no one ever talks about it. You're Will Smith. If you speak out, people will listen." Will sighed, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He didn't want this incident to define him or overshadow his real mission, but he also couldn't ignore the larger implications. After a moment, he said, "Do what you think is right. But remember, this isn't just about clicks, it's about real people." The young man nodded, looking chastened. "I'll think about it." As Will drove away, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that this wasn't over. By the time he got home, the video had already begun to circulate online. Social media was ablaze with hashtags, opinions, and outrage. The footage showed everything: Sarah's dismissive comments, her escalating hostility, and the shocking slap. Within hours, the incident was trending, with people dissecting every second of the interaction. Reactions were polarizing. Many rallied to Will's defense, praising his composure and condemning Sarah's actions. Others questioned his motives, suggesting he had provoked the situation for attention. The comments ranged from supportive to vitriolic, each one adding fuel to the fire. Will's phone buzzed incessantly with calls and messages. Friends, colleagues, and reporters all wanted a statement. His publicist, Lisa, was the first to get through. "Will," she said, her voice tight with urgency, "we need to get ahead of this. The video's everywhere, and people are demanding a response." Will ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the moment. "What do you suggest?" "Something simple and neutral," Lisa said. "Acknowledge what happened, express your disappointment, but don't escalate. We can't let this define the narrative." Will nodded, though his heart wasn't in it. He wasn't sure if neutrality was the right approach, but he also didn't want to fan the flames. After some deliberation, he posted a short statement. "Yesterday, I had an unfortunate experience that highlighted the biases many people face daily. While I'm disappointed by what happened, I believe in focusing on positive change rather than negativity. I'm committed to using this moment as an opportunity to support meaningful conversations and actions." The post garnered millions of reactions within minutes. Support poured in from fans, celebrities, and activists, all praising his grace under pressure. But the controversy also drew detractors who accused him of exploiting the situation for publicity. Meanwhile, the dealership scrambled to control the damage. The video had painted them in an unflattering light, and the backlash was swift. Within hours, they released a statement condemning Sarah's actions and announcing her suspension pending an investigation. Sarah, however, was already facing a storm of her own. Her name and face were all over the internet, and the public outrage was relentless. She received hundreds of hateful messages, some threatening violence. Friends and colleagues distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the controversy. Alone in her apartment, Sarah scrolled through the flood of comments, her hands trembling. The incident played on a loop in her mind, each detail sharpening her shame and regret. She had acted out of frustration and bias, but the consequences were more severe than she had ever imagined. In a rare moment of introspection, Sarah began to confront the root of her prejudice. Memories of her own childhood surfaced, growing up in a struggling family, feeling excluded and judged by wealthier peers. Those experiences had left scars, shaping her worldview in ways she hadn't fully acknowledged. For Will, the aftermath of the incident was both exhausting and illuminating. He spent hours reflecting on what had happened and what it meant in the broader context of his life and work. The incident wasn't just about him, it was a microcosm of the systemic issues he had spent years navigating. He gathered his closest friends and advisors, seeking their counsel. Among them were people he trusted deeply, friends who had known him before fame, mentors who had guided him through difficult times, and colleagues who shared his passion for social justice. "This can't just be about me," Will said during one late-night discussion. "I don't want to be the guy who's always at the center of some controversy, but I also can't ignore what this represents." One of his friends, a filmmaker named Marcus, leaned forward. "Then don't let it just be about you. Use it. Turn this into something bigger, something that helps others." The idea resonated with Will. He realized that the incident, as painful as it was, could be a catalyst for change. He decided to channel the attention into action, using the platform he had to address the deeper issues at play. Will announced his next move on social media, framing it as a response to the incident but also as a continuation of his broader mission. He called it the Auto Party of Good, a community event that would bring joy to underprivileged kids while sparking conversations about prejudice and opportunity. The announcement was met with overwhelming support. Celebrities, activists, and local organizations reached out, eager to participate. The momentum was growing, and for the first time since the incident, Will felt a sense of purpose returning. As preparations for the event began, Will threw himself into the work. He personally oversaw every detail, from selecting the venue to coordinating with sponsors and volunteers. He wanted the event to be a celebration of hope and resilience, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, people could come together to create something beautiful. The day of the event dawned bright and clear, with a crispness in the Los Angeles air that carried the promise of something extraordinary. By sunrise, the chosen venue, a sprawling open lot on the edge of the city, was already a hive of activity. Volunteers bustled about, setting up tents, organizing parking areas, and arranging tables stacked with food, drinks, and giveaways. Rows of luxury cars gleamed in the morning light, their polished surfaces reflecting the enthusiasm that filled the air. Will arrived early, wearing a simple white shirt and jeans, blending in with the volunteers as he moved through the space. His presence energized the team, his natural charisma and genuine warmth inspiring everyone to give their best. He paused occasionally to chat with volunteers, thanking them for their efforts and sharing his vision for the day. As he walked through the lot, he marveled at the sheer scale of what had come together in such a short time. Celebrities and car enthusiasts had rallied around the idea, lending their vehicles and their time to make the event a success. Local organizations had also stepped up, providing logistical support and spreading the word in their communities. What had started as a spark of inspiration was now a full-fledged movement. By mid-morning, families began to arrive. The first wave of guests was greeted with cheers and applause from the volunteers, who handed out wristbands and directed them toward the various activity areas. Children's faces lit up as they caught sight of the cars. Sleek Ferraris, roaring Lamborghinis, and elegant Rolls-Royces lined up like a dream come true. The excitement was contagious, and soon the lot was filled with laughter and the hum of engines. Will made it a point to personally greet as many families as he could. He crouched down to meet kids at eye level, asking about their favorite cars and sharing stories from his own childhood. He told them about the beat-up Ford Taurus that had been his first car, how it had symbolized freedom and possibility despite its flaws. The kids hung on his every word, their eyes wide with wonder. The event was designed to be more than just a spectacle. In addition to the car rides, there were workshops where kids could learn about car design and engineering, interactive exhibits showcasing the history of automobiles, and even a storytelling corner where volunteers read books about resilience and dreaming big. Every detail had been carefully planned to make the day both fun and meaningful. By noon, the highlight of the event began: the car rides. Each child was paired with a volunteer driver, many of whom were celebrities or professional racers. The kids climbed into the cars with a mix of excitement and nervousness, their faces lighting up as the engines roared to life. As the cars sped down a closed-off stretch of road, their laughter and cheers echoed across the venue. Will took a turn driving as well. He picked a bright yellow McLaren, the color as vibrant as the mood of the day. A little boy named Jamal climbed into the passenger seat, clutching the seatbelt with both hands. Will noticed the boy's nervousness and offered a reassuring smile. "You ready, buddy?" he asked. Jamal nodded hesitantly. "I think so." "Don't worry," Will said, his voice gentle. We're going to have fun. Just hold on tight." As they took off, the boy's initial fear melted into pure joy. He leaned forward, grinning from ear to ear as the car accelerated. When they returned to the starting point, Jamal turned to Will, his eyes shining. "That was the best thing ever," he exclaimed. Will laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. "You're a natural. Maybe one day you'll be driving one of these yourself." Jamal's smile faltered slightly. "You think so?" "I know so," Will said firmly. "Dream big, Jamal. You can do anything you set your mind to." The day continued with one highlight after another. Families mingled, kids ran from one activity to the next, and the atmosphere buzzed with positivity. The celebrities who had come to support the event were as engaged as everyone else, chatting with parents, posing for photos, and even joining in the activities. For a few hours, it felt like the barriers that often divided people had dissolved, replaced by a sense of shared humanity. As the afternoon wore on, Will took a moment to step back and survey the scene. The lot was a kaleidoscope of color and movement, a testament to what could be achieved when people came together for a common purpose. He felt a swell of pride, not just in what they had accomplished, but in the impact it was having on everyone involved. But amidst the joy, Will also found himself reflecting on the journey that had led to this moment. The incident at the dealership had been painful, but it had also been a catalyst for something greater. He realized that this event wasn't just about cars or kids. It was about creating a space where dreams could take root, where people could feel seen and valued. As the sun began to set, the event moved into its final phase, a community dinner followed by a brief program of speeches. Long tables were set up under strings of lights, and families gathered to share a meal. The air was filled with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses, a celebration of connection and gratitude. When it was time for the speeches, Will stepped onto a small stage, a microphone in hand. The crowd fell silent, their attention focused on him. He looked out at the sea of faces, children, parents, volunteers, and supporters, all united by the day's events. "Thank you," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Thank you for being here, for believing in this vision, and for making it a reality. Today, we've shown what's possible when we come together, when we choose to build bridges instead of walls." He paused, scanning the audience. This isn't just about cars or a single day of fun. It's about showing these kids, and all of us, that no dream is too big, no goal too far. It's about proving that kindness, generosity, and hope are stronger than any prejudice or obstacle. The crowd erupted into applause, their energy electric. Will raised his hand, motioning for quiet. "Let's not let this be the end. Let's keep pushing. Keep creating spaces where everyone feels they belong. Together, we can make a difference." As he stepped off the stage, the applause continued, echoing into the night. Families began to depart, their hearts full and their spirits lifted. Volunteers worked tirelessly to clean up, their smiles reflecting the success of the day. By the time the venue was empty, Will remained, sitting alone near the stage. He looked out at the now quiet space, the echoes of laughter still ringing in his ears. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of peace. The road ahead would undoubtedly hold more challenges, but today had proven that even the smallest acts of kindness could create ripples that spread far and wide. In his hand, he held a thank you card from one of the families. Inside, a little girl had drawn a picture of herself in a bright red sports car with the words, "Thank you for making my dream come true." Will smiled, his heart full. He had set out to make a difference, and in the process, he had found something he hadn't expected, a renewed sense of purpose. The days following the auto party of good were a whirlwind of emotions, reflection, and unexpected developments. Videos and photos from the event flooded social media, capturing the joy on children's faces, the stunning lineup of luxury cars, and the unity of a diverse group of people who had come together for a common cause. The event became an instant symbol of hope, overshadowing the negativity that had initially sparked it. For Will, the aftermath was bittersweet. While he was proud of what they had accomplished, the public discourse surrounding the dealership incident and the event itself was far from over. The video of the confrontation with Sarah Hudson had continued to gain traction, reigniting debates about prejudice, privilege, and accountability. Will found himself once again at the center of a cultural conversation he hadn't sought, but could no longer avoid. In the wake of the event's success, Will received an overwhelming number of messages from people across the country. Some shared stories of their own experiences with discrimination, thanking him for his courage and grace in handling the situation. Others criticized him, accusing him of using the incident to garner attention or of failing to push hard enough for systemic change. The mixed reactions weighed on him, but he remained steadfast in his belief that action spoke louder than words. The dealership, however, was struggling to recover from the fallout. Public outrage had turned into a full-blown PR crisis, with customers boycotting the business and demanding accountability. Sarah Hudson's name became a lightning rod for discussions about bias in high-end industries, her actions dissected and condemned by people on all sides of the debate. For Sarah, the consequences were immediate and severe. She had been terminated from her position at the dealership, a decision announced through a carefully worded statement that distanced the company from her behavior. But the backlash didn't stop there. Her personal information had been leaked online, and she found herself inundated with hateful messages and even threats. Friends and colleagues, wary of the controversy, began to pull away, leaving her isolated and vulnerable. Alone in her small apartment, Sarah struggled to make sense of what had happened. The shame of her actions weighed heavily on her, but it was the public scrutiny that forced her to confront the deeper issues at play. She replayed the incident in her mind over and over, each time peeling back another layer of her prejudice and insecurity. Her thoughts drifted to her childhood, a series of difficult memories that she had long buried. Growing up in a poor neighborhood, Sarah had often felt the sting of exclusion and judgment. She remembered the way wealthier kids at her school had looked down on her, how she had been made to feel small and inadequate. Over time, those experiences had hardened into a quiet resentment, one she hadn't realized she was carrying until it erupted in that fateful moment with Will. Determined to find a way forward, Sarah began to seek help. She reached out to a local organization that focused on diversity and inclusion training, signing up for workshops that challenged her perspectives and forced her to confront her biases. It wasn't an easy process, but for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope that she could change. Meanwhile, the auto party of good had sparked a ripple effect across the country. Inspired by Will's initiative, other celebrities and organizations began organizing similar events, using their platforms to create opportunities for underprivileged communities. The movement gained momentum, with stories of kindness and generosity flooding the news cycle. Will watched these developments with a mixture of pride and humility. He had never intended to start a movement, but he was grateful that the message of hope and inclusion was resonating far beyond the boundaries of his own efforts. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more work to be done. In the days following the event, Will met with his team to discuss the next steps. They agreed to establish a foundation dedicated to creating opportunities for marginalized communities, focusing on education, mentorship, and access to resources. The foundation would serve as a long-term commitment to the values that had driven the Auto Party of Good, ensuring that the impact of the event would continue to grow. One afternoon, as Will was finalizing plans for the foundation, he received an unexpected email. It was from Sarah Hudson. The message was short but heartfelt. She apologized for her actions, acknowledging the hurt she had caused and expressing her desire to make amends. She explained the steps she was taking to educate herself and offered to volunteer her time and resources to support the foundation's initiatives. Will read the email carefully, his emotions a mix of surprise, skepticism, and respect. It wasn't often that people took full accountability for their mistakes, and he could see the sincerity in Sarah's words. After some thought, he decided to meet with her. They met at a quiet coffee shop, far from the prying eyes of the media. Sarah looked different, more vulnerable, less polished. She spoke openly about her journey, her voice trembling at times as she recounted the pain she had caused and the lessons she was learning. Will listened intently, his expression thoughtful. "I appreciate you reaching out," he said finally. "It takes courage to face your mistakes head-on, but this isn't just about an apology. It's about what you do next." Sarah nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I want to help. I want to be part of the solution, not the problem." Will leaned back in his chair considering her words. "If you're serious, there's a lot of work to be done, but it starts with you, your actions, your choices, your willingness to learn." "I am," Sarah said firmly. "I won't let this define me. I'll let it drive me to be better." As the weeks turned into months, the foundation took shape, its mission fueled by the passion and dedication of everyone involved. Will threw himself into the work, using his platform to amplify the stories of those the foundation aimed to uplift. Sarah, true to her word, became an active volunteer, dedicating her time to mentoring young people and advocating for diversity in her own industry. The experience changed both of them in profound ways. For Will, it reaffirmed his belief in the power of redemption and the importance of meeting challenges with grace and resilience. For Sarah, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, one defined not by her mistakes, but by her efforts to grow and contribute. The story came full circle one sunny afternoon when Will hosted a follow-up event at the same venue. This time, the focus was on education and empowerment, with workshops on entrepreneurship, financial literacy, and creative expression. Families from the first event returned, bringing new friends and sharing stories of how the experience had impacted their lives. As the event drew to a close, Will stood on the same stage where he had delivered his speech months earlier. Looking out at the crowd, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. He smiled as he raised the microphone. "This isn't the end," he said. "It's just the beginning. Let's keep dreaming, keep building, and keep lifting each other up. Together, we can create a world where everyone has the chance to shine." The crowd erupted into applause, their voices a chorus of hope and determination. And in that moment, under the bright Los Angeles sun, Will knew they were on the right path, one paved with compassion, resilience, and the unwavering belief that change was possible. Thank you for finishing this video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Share this video with your friends. Maybe it will inspire someone else. And also, be sure to check out the channel to see other interesting videos. See you in the next issue.